very complex. It is very simple. It is whether there is a teacher in time at the school, the BHU has the doctor and the medicines, whether the road is repaired in time, whether the water supply comes, whether the local officials solve the problem or they pass the bug or the problem upwards to be lost in files forever. Governance is the face of the state that the citizens meet in their everyday life. That is why subnational governance matters so much, because citizens do not experience the federation in abstract constitutional language. They experience the state through delivery at the provincial, district, tehsil, and union council level in their lives. And that is why this report matters. It gives us evidence from the real arena where states either succeed or fail implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan today stands at an inflection point. We have struggled through economic turbulence and worked hard to restore macroeconomic stability, although we are now, along with the whole international community, yet again in another turbulent cycle due to the war in our region that is affecting and impacting every country. But stability is not the destination. Stability is only the runway. If we do not now use this runway for takeoff, then stability by itself will become a stagnant equilibrium. Takeoff requires governance, growth requires governance, and investment requires governance. Exports, the first pillar of Udan Pakistan on which our future economic sovereignty depends, also requires governance. Building public trust requires governance. I've said before and I repeat today, the difference between stagnation and transformation is governance alone. The difference between policy ambition and citizen impact is governance. And the difference between announcements and delivery is governance. That is also why Udan Pakistan is not merely an economic framework. It is a governance test, because no nation can dream of becoming a $1 trillion economy by 2035 with fragmented institutions, outdated procedures, weak local systems, and business as usual administration. You cannot run a 21st century economy with a 19th century administrative mindset. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most important lessons of Pakistan Governance Forum, which we recently held, was this: business as usual is over. If we continue with silo-based governance, weak implementation, poor coordination, excessive centralization, and stop-start reforms, then we will continue to underperform no matter how great our national potential may be, no matter how great ambition we may set for ourselves. Pakistan's challenge is not potential, as I said. Pakistan's challenge is conversion of potential into performance, and that comes with governance. This conversion happens through institutions, and strong nations are not built by speeches alone. They are built by systems, continuity, accountability, and capable human resource that builds capable institutions that outlast individuals. Ladies and gentlemen, let me come to a major governance lesson from our recent constitutional and administrative history. The 18th Amendment was a historic milestone. It strengthened provincial autonomy and redefined the federal balance. That was an important and necessary step. But we must also honestly acknowledge its unfinished sight. Power was devolved from the federation to the provinces, but in many cases, Actually, in all the cases, it was not devolved further to empower district local governments. This is one of the central governance failures of the post-18th Amendment period. As a result, many social sectors such as education, health, local development, municipal services, population planning, and community level delivery became increasingly centralized at the provincial level. So while Islamabad became lighter in theory, provincial capitals became heavier in practice. Power moved from one capital to another, but too often it did not reach the citizen. That is the problem. Devolution was meant to bring governance closer to the people, but if a citizen must still look upwards to distant authority for every school, hospital, clinic, sanitation, water, or local infrastructure issue, then devolution remains incomplete. I say this very candidly. For many citizens in Pakistan, devolution stopped halfway. District governments remained weak, local governments remained uncertain, fiscal authority remained constrained, and administrative autonomy remained limited. And social sectors became overly centralized in provincial secretariats. No provincial capital, however efficient, can understand the lived realities of every district in real time. A school issue in Narowal, a sanitation problem in Rajanpur, or a health problem in Shahdad Court, or any small town or village, or healthy facility gap in remote areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or a municipal crisis in a remote Tehsil of Balochistan cannot always be solved through centralized provincial command. The closer the problem is to the people, the closer the power to solve it should also be. That must become a guiding principle of reform. Ladies and gentlemen, if we are serious about governance reform, then we must move beyond the old binary of federal versus provincial. The next generation of reform must focus equally on provincial-local relations. We need empowered district level and local governments with clear administrative authority, predictable fiscal resources, professional capacity, and accountability to the people they serve. Without that, citizen-centric governance will remain a slogan, not a system. Let me put it plainly, a strong federation does not fear strong provinces. Likewise, strong provinces should not fear strong local governments. In fact, the state becomes stronger when every tier performs its proper function effectively. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a few broad principles that must now guide reform. First, planning must become evidence-based, integrated, and outcome-oriented. Second, budgeting must shift from the line item routine to performance-driven priorities. Still, in our government or public sector, the whole focus of budgeting and planning is what is the utilization. Nobody ever questions, you have used 90% of the funds, but what are the outcomes? So we need to move from inputs to now outcomes-based budgeting. Third, public financial management must become more transparent, disciplined, and predictable. Fourth, fiscal space must be created through reform and growth, not merely through blunt cuts. A nation cannot cut development and expect to develop. Unfortunately, recently we saw a 100 billion rupee cut in the development budget. Now, this is a cost. Maybe it is not a saving. It means that tomorrow you will incur far greater liability in terms of cost overruns as well as revision in the cost of the project. So we need to focus more on resource mobilization rather than do our development cuts. And fifth, local governance must become the operating core of service delivery. These are not abstract principles. They are the difference between drift and direction. I also want to emphasize that reform is not the responsibility of government alone. Government must lead, yes, but think tanks must provide evidence. Development partners must support nationally owned priorities. Civil society must keep the citizens at the center of reform debate and agenda, and academia must help shape better policy design. That is why I value this report. Evidence matters, honest evaluation matters, and learning from experience matters. But let us be honest again, Pakistan does not need reports that decorate shelves. Pakistan needs reforms that change outcomes. We do not need reforms for presentations. We need reforms for performance. We need better governance because our people deserve better schools, better hospitals, better services, and better opportunities. We need better governance not because our public sector officials deserve better offices, better cars, and better perks. We need better governance because our youth cannot inherit a country of delayed files, broken systems, and unfinished reforms. We need better governance because global competitiveness is impossible without state capability and without state being efficient in utilizing its resources, both efficient and effective. And we need better governance because in the modern world, dignity belongs not only to sovereign states, but to states that perform and that provide better quality of life for their citizens. So, ladies and gentlemen, my message today is simple. Let us stop treating governance as a secondary matter. Let us stop postponing institutional reform. Let us all join hands and put these reforms into practice. And let us stop confusing announcements with achievement. Let us convert evidence into action. And let us convert lessons into systems and intent into implementation. Let this report become not the end of the program, but the beginning of a deeper reform movement. And one very important lesson from all such programs is the issue of sustainability. You know, we have seen one after another such interventions have come with development partners in which our public servants have gone on very high pay packages. It has benefited them greatly. For 6 months or 1 year, they are able to earn very good consultancy in either pounds or dollars. But at the end of the project, the whole project is lost. There is no impact. It is not mainstreamed into the functions of either the department or the ministry wherever it was intended to make a change. So now, therefore, we have made it mandatory in Planning Commission also that whenever we have such projects, every project must indicate that how that intervention shall have sustainability built into it. Because end of the donor or development partner funding should not mean that the whole effort will be switched off and everything will be lost. As the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives, we remain committed to evidence-based policy making, institutional strengthening, outcomes-based development, and stronger coordination across all tiers of government. I, in the end, congratulate SDPI on this important contribution. I thank UNDP and FCDO for its support, and I acknowledge the governments of Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and all those experts and public servants who contributed to this effort. The road ahead is difficult, but it is very clear. Nations rise when reforms become habit. Nations rise when institutions become stronger then individuals. A nation rise when governance begins to serve citizens with integrity, speed, and purpose. That is the Pakistan we must build. Thank you very much, Pakistan.